Welcome back. ISIS has released a picture of what it says is the bomb used to blow up a Russian passenger plane last month. The image appeared in Dabiq. That's the ISIS online English language magazine. The IED is made up of a can of Schweppes tonic water and two devices containing wires that appeared to be the detonator and the switch. ISIS is well known for promoting itself online, using the internet and social media to radicalize its followers and disseminate threats. But now there's a new front in the online war. The cyber hacking group Anonymous says it will hunt ISIS down. The hackers have vowed to launch their biggest ever cyber operation against the terrorist group. "We will find you and we will never let up," Anonymous warned in a video released this week. So what could Anonymous do to ISIS? Can a group of cyber hackers be more effective than international security experts? Joining me now in Toronto is Ramona Pringle. She's a technology expert and assistant professor at Ryerson University's School of Media. And in Montreal, Gabriella Coleman, professor and the Wolf Chair in Scientific and Technological Literacy at McGill University. And of course, Gabriella has written an extensive book on Anonymous. So I'll start with you, Gabriella. It's not the first time Anonymous has said they're going to go after ISIS. There was a similar campaign after the attacks in Charlie Hebdo. Why do you think this group is choosing to respond to ISIS this way again? Is there anything different about it this time around?
Well, certainly this is not a new operation. Nevertheless, they're redoubling their efforts. And in terms of what's new, I think that they've attracted a lot more attention this time around, in part because of their video declaring war. And I think the types of people that are participating in this operation are slightly different than what we got the first time around.
And what do you think they're doing concretely? Like, what kinds of things are they targeting? Is it just what Anonymous does, except they're going after ISIS, or is it different?
It is a little bit different insofar as they are targeting the online propaganda machine that is behind ISIS. And generally, Anonymous doesn't like to touch that sort of thing because they generally lean towards free speech. And in this case, they're curbing an entity's free speech, but they're kind of throwing that aside because of the fact that it's a terrorist organization. They kill people. And so in that sense, it's a little bit unusual compared to other operations.
And Ramona, let me bring in you. What do you think makes this fight so unusual between Anonymous and ISIS?
Well, what I think is interesting about Anonymous stepping in here is that I think in some ways they're uniquely situated to take on a group like ISIS, in that it's almost like a hockey game, that if you have a hockey game where one person is playing by the rules of hockey and the other person is just beating everyone up, how do you actually play that hockey game? And so here they are, they're both global, they're both borderless, and they don't necessarily play by established rules of war. That war is not, war was once fought on a battlefield. Once upon a time, you didn't go after civilians. And for better or for worse, we can think of, cases with both of these groups where they've done both of those things, where we're no longer living in the world that we used to. The rules are changing fast. And we talk about this a lot when it comes to technology and other realms, when it comes to our privacy. So many aspects of our relationship with technology that we don't have rules, we don't have regulation. But what it means is that for government or for military or for police, where they still have sort of old world rules, best practices that they need to follow, all of a sudden a group like Anonymous can step in. And I think part of the reason that people are responding well, or at least with piqued interest, is because in some ways it's a bit more of a level playing field in that way.
Well, because they're both willing to do whatever it takes. I guess that's sort of what it is. One is it may be more extreme than the other. Who has the upper hand, Gabriella, do you think?
Well, on the technological field, Anonymous does, although I will say that ISIS is unique in comparison to Al-Qaeda for a couple of reasons, one of which is that they really did decide to exploit everything that the internet has to offer, from using propaganda videos to using Telegram, an encrypted kind of chat application, Twitter. They're willing to really innovate in that realm. And second, they've attracted hacker types, undoubtedly.
Yeah.
But nevertheless, Anonymous is primarily a technology movement, right? So all the participants kind of come from that world. So they have a slight upper hand in the technological field. Now, ISIS has an upper hand in many other areas otherwise.
Yeah, in terms of what they're willing to do in terms of violent acts and attacks.
Absolutely.
But Ramona, what are you seeing in terms of the way they use propaganda? They've got a magazine. It's quite sophisticated.
Well, absolutely, that's it. I mean, we talk about how ISIS uses technology. Well, it's 2015, and just the same way that work has been revolutionized by technology, the way that we can work with remote teams, whether people are in the suburbs or whether they're in another continent, whether, when it comes to recruiting talent, you're no longer with a company looking for people who are the best talent in your city, but really the best fit, the most passionate people for what you're doing anywhere around the world when it comes to promoting work. Our lives and our work has become borderless, and what we see is ISIS doing the exact same thing, only with different end results, with different goals, with different motivation. But when it comes to the way that they're using media, I think especially for that propaganda machine, I think the other piece in all of this that we see is this sort of mass exhaustion. It's something that I see when it comes to our Twitter feeds, our social media, is in a sense this post-traumatic stress for people who aren't even directly related to what's going on. We're not necessarily in France, but you kind of can't look away. People are in a sense kept hostage as this information comes forward, and it is graphic. And because of the nature of free speech and the internet and the openness and all of these things that have the potential to be so positive, it also means that we're seeing content that impacts us in extremely emotional ways, and I think that there's a narrative component to it that they are successfully manipulating.
Yeah. So if on the other side, you're talking about ISIS that is successfully manipulating, but if on the other side, Gabriella, you have Anonymous trying to pull down some of that stuff, either shut down Twitter feeds or pull down I don't know exactly what they would do. What kind of impact would that have on the ISIS movement writ large?
So I think that currently what Anonymous is doing is making what I would call a small to moderate dent in their propaganda machine. So apparently since last year, their online presence, ISIS's online presence has not grown, in part because of what Anonymous has done. But this is the important thing to emphasize. Now ISIS is an established brand. They're all over the media because of what they have already done. So that dent can only go so far. Had Anonymous kind of intervened as ISIS was kind of gearing up that propaganda machine, I think it could have made a big difference. They've slowed that down, but now they really have all of our attention and potential recruits as well. So it's really difficult to make a lasting impact right now, I think. So
let's end on this point for both of you then. Ramona, how does a mainstream group, an authoritarian group like the RCMP or CSIS or a government, how do they use Anonymous to try and defeat ISIS? I mean, because it seems that there is a common goal there, except some are willing to follow the rules and some aren't. So how could Canadians or how could the Canadian government harness the power of Anonymous?
That's a great question. I think it's a really interesting piece in all of this right now, and I think it's ultimately where we need to see collaboration moving forward, because there is a shared goal here. In the past, there's been challenges when it comes to a group like Anonymous working with a group like, let's say, the RCMP, because they have been at odds with each other in the past. And I think we saw with the Rehtaeh Parsons case that the RCMP said that they would be willing to work with Anonymous, but that Anonymous would have to take off their masks, which of course, Anonymous by its definition is not going to take off their masks to work with them. What's interesting is following the Charlie Hebdo attacks, when those Twitter accounts were taken down by Anonymous, there was questions about, well, were they taking down the accounts or were they flagging the accounts and then Twitter was taking them down? And if that is the case, I think that's an interesting model for collaboration, in that it's the rules of Twitter, the rules and regulations, the terms of service, but it's the intel, the manpower. I mean, a lot of the real assets that Anonymous has going for it is the manpower, the hours that they're able to put in sifting through, searching through online content. And I think that those collaborations where they may not be official, but where it may be revealing intel, where it may be being able to put in those man hours and then letting either, a group like Twitter or the RCMP or military step in another capacity without it necessarily needing to be that we need to find common ground, because it's still challenging, because they are, one that's governed by rules and one that's really less so. Yeah,
Gabriella, as someone that's studied and spent so much time with people inside that movement, is that something that they would embrace or be open to in any way?
Well, what's interesting, first of all, is that the government, I think, is going to take a hands-off approach to let Anonymous do what they're doing and not prosecute anyone if there's illegal activity, because it's in their interests. But they're in a little difficult of a situation because, let's just say in 2 months Anonymous does something that's, directly attacks the government and then they were just supporting Anonymous, the government, you can see how that would put them in a very difficult kind of position. So I think mostly we'll see a hands-off approach. But that said, some individuals in Anonymous hate this operation precisely because it aligns with national governments and their interests. Others have said, well, you know, if we have good intelligence and this can help take ISIS down, we will offer it to them. This is about saving lives. And then finally, there have been breakaway groups, the most famous of these being GhostSec, who really do want to work with the government quite closely. And by breaking off and not being anonymous, they're in a position where they can do so, and the government can also more easily work with them.
Okay, ladies, that's very smart talk. I appreciate you both being here today. Thanks.
Thank you.